Hey everybody, welcome back. This is our third session of the day, and we're going to dive straight into the API sandbox for Onemoney. So please give me some virtual applause for our next speaker, Vamsi Madhav, Onemoney. Thank you, and welcome, Vamsi. Over to you.
Hey, thanks, Ariman, and thanks a lot, guys. Must have been a pretty strenuous second half of Sunday. So let me just get going, show you the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend I'm one of you, right? And let's assume that you want to get going with Onemoney's APIs. So the Onemoney team has actually been undertaking its own hackathon in the last, couple of weeks. And so what we've put together is a developer portal and then a whole process simple for you to figure out how to kind of get started with Onemoney, right? So the first step you do is you basically just type out developer.onemoney.in. This is the same as what's there in the Hack Bible, right, that Ariman has put together. So this then takes you to the Onemoney developer portal and allows you to sign up or log in with either your Google account or your GitHub account. So, it says you're still in beta. That's just a euphemism for saying don't get upset if things don't work absolutely kosher. But do get upset if you find that we don't respond to if you write to us at support@onemoney. And hopefully in the next few days, we'll feel confident enough of removing this, right? So I'm just going to get started and I'm going to sign up with my Google account, right? So I'm going to just have a Google account, Vamsi at onemoney.in. So the first thing it does is it asks me a little bit about myself. So I'm going to work for AVS Unicorn. In case you're wondering who that is, that's Ariman Vishwa's company. I think with all the hard work he's doing, he deserves at least one unicorn, right? So that's the company I represent. We encourage you guys to give, your actual email and contact number, not because we want to sell you stuff, but it'll be great to reach out to you during the hackathon, find out how things are, and seek your feedback, right, to improve, work with your use case and stuff, right? And a little bit about your role. So, what role do you represent in your company? So let's assume I'm just a developer and the most important person of the company, I suppose. But then, so once I do that, now this is important. You've heard enough from all the other companies. So we offer one of two services you could kind of sign up for, right? And depending on what your use case is, so we encourage you to basically click on these no mores. I'm going to take you there in a bit and read up on these two services. But it's very simple. If you are looking to build middleware, for FIUs, or if you're looking to build consent management systems and consent interfaces, or if you're looking to build security systems, data management systems, you might want to directly connect to Onemoney. We call that the network API and proceed, right? But if your goal is to build, let's say, a PFM service, or a lending service, or a wealth advisory service, or a merchant payment service, right? Something that is an end-use application, the Money One, we call it the data gateway software. That really, in simpler terms, is the FIU service. It's actually the FIU and the FIP service, but for the purposes of the hackathon, let's all assume that we are all here trying to be users of the information, right? And so this is the FIU service, right? So at this point in time, you will have to, with one of the IDs, so I signed up with my Google ID, I have to select any one of the two services we offer. If you'd like to do both, one way to do that is, you just sign up with two different IDs and proceed. The other way is you reach out to us and we really understand and help you figure that out. So I'm going to assume that Ariman wants to, through his unicorn, actually deliver a super app with all kinds of financial services. So let me just select Money One, right? So that takes me into the portal. And the very first thing it asks me is for me to add my app. So a little bit about the app because this is important for the generation of the keys. So let's say my app name is, Super Loans app, and I'm building an Android package. So you could be building an iOS package, you could be building a web URL. So it's in, some name, package name. So you're encouraged to put the fully qualified package name here to avoid authentication errors. So, just some nitty gritties here that we'd like you guys to observe, so that the error situations are less. So you add the app, and then you can add multiple apps as you go along. For this purposes, I'll assume that I just want to build one app, so I just set that up. Then you've got 3 or 4 other different settings, and once I'm kind of set, I am good to go. So the next thing, which is most important perhaps for me, is to figure out, hey, what's the test data that I'm going to get access to, right? So what Onemoney provides is actually 3 modes of test data. So the first one is what's called the preset mode, which means I've got to do nothing, right? So there is a test VUA. I perhaps just need to store this somewhere. So I'm just going to kind of copy that and, just kind of open the notepad and just store this here, right? Saying, okay, this is going to be useful for me. And I'm going to just say this is the test VUA, right? And it says that the profile is consumer and that this has already got data types of savings, RD, and FD. That's recurring and fixed deposits. Mutual funds is coming soon. I think in a couple of days, we're going to launch an update with mutual fund data also available. And this has got accounts and transactions. So I will take you to the docs where we describe what test data we have. And there is no OTP business here, so all you got to do is use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 whenever prompted, right, in whichever. So this is good. But just a little bit about the other kinds of test data modes that we support. The second mode is something called personal mode, right? So what this means is you just enter your mobile number, right? And the test data that we already have, which got about 6 months data for savings and about 7 transactions for a recurring deposit. So it mimics like a 7-month recurring deposit and a fixed deposit that's active, right? So all of that account data becomes yours. So what happens is that essentially you can then go to Onemoney, and I'll show you that briefly. You can behave like the user, go to the Onemoney web app, that's fastest, right? Downloading an app and all of that is a little more friction. And then you can link these accounts, the test accounts that are already there in our mock bank with your mobile number, right? So that's kind of you making the default test data personal to you. And then the third is something called design mode. Now, this is coming soon, but I'd like to take a minute to show you what's coming, right? This is just the Envision mock-up, and hopefully in a couple of days this will go live as well. So in the design mode, we allow you to do 2 things. You can download the test data. So I'm just going to go, let's say, click on this and design mode. So I download the test data. It shows me that there's 3 kinds of types of data, right? So there's bank, GST, and then mutual fund. So right now we have the bank data available. So that's one JSON file which has profile, account summary, and transactions, and rich enough, well thought out, actual data, right? When I say actually, doesn't mean it belongs to somebody, but we've taken pains to construct data sets such that you have, a good mix of data types, good volume, good addresses, good phone numbers. So you can do stuff, whatever use cases, assuming that, it's not just, some silly data out there, right? And we're going to just put out GSTN and mutual fund design mode as well. We already have GSTN dummy data in the preset. If you subscribe to Money One, mutual funds is going to come shortly, right? So you download this data, and this will be downloaded as a JSON. Feel free to modify it. Of course, be careful to ensure that you don't tamper around with the structure. But let's say you want to test your use case for a certain filter in mind, right? So let's say you want to see if your app will pick out transactions which are above 10,000 rupees and which are ATM transactions, and maybe you want to do something with that. So in this mode, you can design your own data, and then when you're ready with what you want to do, you can upload the data back. And when you upload it back, you follow the same philosophy. You just enter the mobile number that you want that data to be registered against. So it's like creating an account in our mock bank and saying, hey, this is the mobile number that's going to be registered against, right? So this facility is going to be available also for GST and NMF. So if you're building something for SMEs, you might want to construct your own GST and data. The schemas that we will provide will mimic the actual GST and data schemas that have been defined within the ecosystem. Likewise with the mutual funds, if you're building a PFM app, wanting to show folks their 360-degree view of balances, you can construct your own stuff. But this is kind of like phase 2. If I were you, I would perhaps just start with preset mode, just test out my whole stuff, and then maybe a week later, when you're confident with your app, come back here and use the design mode and let us know how it goes, right? So this is basically what is design mode, and that's coming soon. So you finish this. Now the third setting, which is really the heart of the matter and something that anybody who's building an app and wants to join the account aggregator ecosystem needs to know, is what are the consent parameters, right? So we call this consent settings. And essentially what it is it's a list of your products, right? And the consent parameters for the product. So to begin with, I have not yet set it up, right? So let me click on add new. Now it takes me through a series of settings which really are the heart of the consent artifact. But what it does is it provides me templates, right? So the first thing it says is, hey, what's the purpose of your seeking data, right? And these are as defined by RBI. So let's say AVS Unicorn simply wants to offer a simple smart loan. That's their product, right? And for that, they want the purpose of the seeking data is to analyze the aggregated statement. Now, once you select a purpose, some of these consent parameters below are actually pre-filled with appropriate sample values, to make your life easier, right? So you don't have to sweat over what's a good value and what's not. But what you do have to do is just tell us your product name. So I'm going to call it, let's say, AVS Super Loan, right? And now this is important. We encourage you to basically set a product code. So I'm just going to say AVSL001. Now, why is this important? I'll come to that when I show you the APIs. But this code has to be passed. Whenever you invoke a consent-related API FinPro, you basically have to tell FinPro for traceability purposes that this consent request is going to be traced back in my systems to this product code, right? So it's a traceability feature. And then just give us a little short description, so we know what you're building. Simple, smart, fast loans, right? So you save that. Now, what we've done is, based on that purpose that you've defined, we've defined the templates of our own, which we think are reasonable, right? So the consent mode that we support right now is store. There are special tracks for the query and stream and stuff like that. So, that will come in the future. Consent validity, this, and there are nice little, sentences here, which hopefully will make it easy for anybody to understand. Represents the period of time within which you're allowed to pull data from consumers' accounts, right? So it starts from right now, because I'm kind of setting this whole thing now. And by default for this product, I want a 7-day validity period, right? So anytime after the consent request date, which means you set this up today and a week later, you actually, initiate this for one particular customer, the consent request at that point in time will pick up this parameter and essentially pre-fill this. So all this setting is being done so that MoneyOne or FIU service knows what to automate on your behalf, so you don't have to worry about all of these mechanics, right? Then what are the FI types? So this is aggregated statement, so we've pre-filled deposit, right? But you're at liberty, for some reason you want to select other types of deposits. So this right now is restricted to what we can offer as test data. When we have GST, MF, this will kind of go up. And when you go to live mode, right now this is all test mode. This is going to be live mode. So some of you would perhaps want to continue with Onemoney and then bump up your applications into production, we will offer an easy enough journey for you to just use the same subscription and bump it up to live mode. And then you could add more FI types, right? The consent types are transactions, profile, balance, the components. So you pretty much let everything remain as it is. This is a one-time fetch because you just want to analyze it to decide whether to give a loan or not. The data range defines, what's the history of the data, right? I've had questions on Slack saying, hey, can we get history? You absolutely can. And if you go through this, you'll find some short information where it says the two kinds of things, right? For a lender who pulls data once, this might just be last 6 months of transaction history. But for a PFM app that, let's say, wants to pull data hourly, right? This could well be the last 1 hour of transaction history, right? So this offers, according to the spec, whatever are the valid values of various enums. So you could just set that. And then data life, again, we've set it to what we think is a reasonable period for this template, this use case where you want to analyze a statement, 7 days. This could again be much larger. In the case of PFM, you may want to hold the data for a longer period. So all of this you do. Data filters is an optional thing, and it's something that's anyway part of the query language. So you finish it. So now you've got your product set up. The product code, you remember I said this is something that you have to put into your API. So it's a good idea to just keep that somewhere here. So I'm just going to say product code and put it here. Don't look at all of these others. Huh? You don't have my consent, by the way. So anyway, okay. So I'm done now. So now I just need to get API keys and get started. So when I go to API keys, there's a small little message here which says, if I'm subscribing to Onemoney, which I'm not in this example, but for those of you who may want to directly subscribe to the network API, right? Please write to us at support because we will then exchange API key information. Shortly, we will kind of make this also self-service. Give us a few days, but for now, just write to us in support, right? But if it's just money one, this is not relevant. It is self-service. So generate the key, and this is what I get. I get a client ID and a client secret. Most of you would be familiar with this on any API platform. So again, this is very important. So I store this, right? And this time I'm going to just basically create a short little table and say, okay, this is the client ID, right? And this is going to be useful for me when I now show you how we can get started, right? With these by actually connecting to the APIs. So I didn't get the client secret. Okay, all set. Now there's one more important thing that will become important. I'll come back to that. So the secret is shown only one time. Don't lose it, else you have to regenerate. That's fine. So if I do lose the secret, I can come back and regenerate. We're going to shortly have webhooks up there. But if in the interim you want to set up some notification endpoints and stuff like that, you want to exchange information, do write to us and we can exchange or understand those endpoints where you want us to send something up. We're going to launch webhooks shortly as well. And then profile and configurations, right? These are additional configurations on the services, SDKs and stuff like that, right? So that's pretty much it. If there is a support question at any point in time, just drop in an email. Again, we're going to make this a little more detailed with issue text boxes and stuff like that. But good enough to go started, right? So at this stage, I feel good that I think I've kind of covered all the stuff. Now, what do I do next? So there is this go to docs, right next to Money One. So let me click on that. So what it does is it takes me to the Money One Docs API documentation, and this has got a lot of content, but hopefully all good content. If you want to learn about, what are the data flows, so we've kind of tried to do our best to explain it as simply as possible. And there are these small little call-outs which explain key concepts, right, which are relevant for you. But But let's assume that you will take time to go through this. You're eager to get started. You just want to get your hands on something and get started. Click on this API reference guide, and you'll find a Postman collection, right? Um, so so let me do that. So let me actually see. So let's assume that I've gone through the stuff. I understand the basic flow. I've read the flow. How do I actually now see this in action, right? So let me first download the Postman collection. All right. I've downloaded that. Now let me just open Postman. Okay, so let me first delete whatever I had here. Right. So, all right. Cool. So now I have no collection. So I'm going to first import the Postman collection that I downloaded. I set the download to my desktop. So this is the one. Yep, 421. So I import it. So this is the Money One Postman collection. I imported, right? So what I see here are essentially, let me just close all of these. Don't say. Yeah, so these basically are, the APIs that you would have to consume off the FIU service, and basically get readily usable data. So let's see what's the first thing. So quite logically, the first thing is, you perhaps have to figure out a way to request consent, right? So it could happen that the consumers come in and he's giving you his VUA. So remember, I said the easiest way to get started is just take the predefined Onemoney VUA that we have, and just see the whole flow in action. So perhaps that's what I will do, right? So I will just call these APIs using. Let me look at what's there in the headers. Okay, so I need the client ID, client secret, organization ID, and app identifier. All right, so I recognize client ID, client secret. The app identifier is the package name that I set up there. So let me at least fill up what I had set up here. So the client ID, that's this. All right. Then the client secret. Now the organization ID is really something called an FIU ID. So since you've subscribed to our FIU service, I mean, you are the FIU, right? The financial information user. Our service is just here to, ensure you get access to the data. So this ID is important because our service services multiple FIUs with kind of one instance right now, and so it's important that you put this and tell us who you are whenever you are consuming our API. So that AVS 0021. I'm just going to set that up in the headers. And then the app identifier is really whatever I put here, right? So this is the package name. So I've got to tell the name of the app. So now that I have the headers, right, I can perhaps just look at the body. So what does it have? So the Postman collection basically has some default values, right? And what does it demand of you? It basically says, hey, if you need to request consent, tell me, what's the identifier of the party that you're requesting consent from, right? So by default, the identifier type we support is mobile, and the value is that mobile number of the test VUA. So we've kind of filled it up and given it to you. And then the VUA itself, this is a dummy VUA that's already pre-linked with accounts, so that's already set up on Onemoney, right? Now, what are these two things, product ID and account ID? Remember I said every request you place has got to be traced back to a certain product, right? So what is the product ID? You define the product ID as AVS loan 001, right? So let me just take that here. What is the account ID? The term account is used in multiple places, so it kind of could get confusing. Now, what do we mean here by account is we're saying your service. So let's say your ABS loan. So you're a lending service, right? So what is that one instance of the product that is actually getting sold for which you are requesting the consent? Because the product is essentially, it's a bunch of parameters, and whether you're making a loan to person A or to person B, the product parameters don't change, right? So the consent parameters don't change from one borrower to the other. But for traceability purposes, you do need to know the loan application number, perhaps, right, that this request is being placed for. Or if it's a PFM service or a wealth management service, you will perhaps have a customer ID. So something that uniquely represents that instance of the product that you are actually delivering and for which you're seeking consent, right? So let me just assume that this is whatever AVS 1234, right? Let's assume that's your loan application ID. Now let's see what happens if I actually connect to the Sandbox API of, okay, so there is a signature does not match. There's always Murphy somewhere, right? All right, so there's some issue at this point in time is when you connect to support at Onemoney and you find out from our techies on Slack what you're doing wrong. Clearly, I've done something wrong here. Just so you know, I'm the product guy, so spare me the bad stares, all right? So, but this is effectively how it should work, right? And essentially, once you get the consent request placed, you could then just go into the Sandbox. Let me just the web app in the Sandbox, right? So if you yeah. So let me just so the easiest way for you to check is you just go to the Sandbox, type out the test mobile number, right, which is essentially 1 followed by 9 nines, and then you put in the dummy OTP, and then when you log in, what you should be seeing is a consent request. Now, this name will actually be AVS Unicorn, right? If you get that API call right, which I didn't because I clearly didn't do something right, but essentially you will get the consents list and you will see your consent request pending here, right? And then when you click on that consent request, you will actually see the details with all the parameters that you set up, right? So remember, we set something up as an aggregated statement. These are the three kinds of accounts that are already there. The components, so everything that you set up, you can actually see it flow through, right, through the APIs. And then when you click approve, it essentially asks you for an OTP, which again, every time you see an OTP in the Sandbox, blindly just say 1 2 3 4 5 6, and this is done, right? So once this is done, what would happen is when you now go back to your Postman, and when this works, you will get something called a consent handle and a consent ID. Sorry. So the consent ID is the only parameter that you need to store at your side. Remember, all the underlying mechanics of storing of the consent, the asynchronous calls, between the service, the FinPro service, and Onemoney A, all of that you don't have to bother about, right? So all you need to bother about is tell us what customer, what product of yours, and for what loan application or PFM, service instantiation of yours are you seeking consent for. The only external information you need to get from the consumer is the VUA, which is fair. It's like UPI, right? You need to get the UPI ID to get the payment. And then when consent is approved, there is a consent ID, and from that point in time, you essentially take the consent ID, you hit the get consents list to actually get the consent artifact and all account details that the consumer has included in that consent artifact. And then the simplest way, the third step to actually get data, is you call the get all FI data. You pass the consent ID. If I can just show the request response structures, you pass the consent ID and it will give you the actual data, right? So again, so the three-step process: just request consent, pass the mobile number, to just get started, use the test VUA. You could do your additional personal mode and your own mobile number and all of that later. And you get the consent ID. You then do get consents list. Here again, you can simply pass the product ID and the account ID, and you will get the actual consent artifacts. You get the consent ID in response. You go to get all FI data, and you just pass the consent ID. You get the data. So simple three-step process. There's of course other APIs. There's the Gst Data API, and the whole promise of FinPro is that we are going to granularize the data. So not only you have all FI data, which is kind of like the entire statement, right, and all accounts within a consent. So this is like the the big basket, right, of data. But you could get FI data specifically for a certain link reference number, which is essentially a token for an account. You could look at it that way and say, and this comes back in response from FinPro, right, after it does the mechanics. So this is a tokenized account number, to put it simply. So you're asking for data only of that account, right, and which was approved as part of a certain consent. You could also just quite simply get the balance, right, again by just saying, let's say you're a PFM service, you just want to balance checks frequently, and so on and so forth. So very eager to hear from you on what more granularization you would expect from FinPro as a service, so that you get readily usable data at a granular level, right? So that's essentially how things will work. Let me take you back to what we have as content, right? So that's the product. What do we have as content? So we've got, again, if you go back to the introduction, right at the start, we kind of ask you again what you're looking to build. And if you feel at this stage, and I'm going to take you shortly to the Onemoney API, spend 10 minutes there and then close. But if you feel that you want to read up about the other one to compare, there's an easy link here. So read on, figure out how to sign up. So you could directly land here and then click on developer portal. It'll take you back there. Now what's important here is what is the integration options, right? So this whole mechanism of how you orchestrate on the front end. So everything I said is more or less the server side that you have to do. Now what do you do on the front end? You're building an app. How do you ensure that you get all of this act of taking the VUA? And what if the customer is obviously he wouldn't have a VUA in most cases. You're dealing with citizens of India who have no clue about this. So how do you nudge them to register with a chosen account aggregator? All of that is taken care of by something we have as the FinPro Android standard SDK, right? The coming soon is just to say that we're putting finishing touches up to it. It'll be up on JCenter shortly. And, but we have a video out here that explains how to integrate, and we'll keep updating this if there are changes. But go through the video, you'll understand the steps, and we have short steps as to what you need to do to basically install and initialize the SDK in your app. And then we've got the FinPro server integration, right, which is essentially what are the steps you've got to do to orchestrate the act of consent-backed data collection for you, right, using FinPro as a service. So simple 5-step procedure, 3 steps I just covered, and that's about it, right? What is the test data that you get? Here's where we kind of describe the test data that you have through our mock FIP. So we've got 3 active accounts across savings, FDRD. We've got 100 transactions spanning 6 months, mix of debits, credits. We're also kind of saying what this could be useful for. So, look up your use case and perhaps you'll know what kind of data to look at. We have an RD account and we're going to shortly get GST and MF as well. And the 3 modes that I described earlier on in the portal, they are described here as well. The API reference guide quickly tells you the base URL, the authorization parameters, and the difference. So if you're calling the APIs from a front-end application, then you got to send 3 out of these 4, and the client secret basically comes in only if you're making the API call from the server side, right? So error documentation, which obviously is very critical. We've tried to do our best to get that right. So there is an error codes section, and then there's common error codes, and then API specific error codes, right? So as you're going through the APIs, please look this up to figure out what errors you could expect and what the next steps could be from your standpoint, right, to actually make your code work well. The Postman collection, and then we actually have the API documentation. So broadly, it's broken into 2 sets of APIs: consent management, data management. So this is what FinPro offers as a service. So within consent management, how do you place a consent request? So the request response parameters with sample request, sample response. We're going to be making updates to to look and feel a lot over the next few days, and we're going to add a little copy function shortly and stuff like that. So it's easy for you to copy the code. Get consents list, right? I showed you this. What are the request response parameters? Get notification. So this is a webhook that you need to set up, where we can notify you through FinPro. This is something we're going to launch shortly. So today, as soon as data is available, we expect you to ping the API, the data API, or ping the consents API to ask, saying, hey, is the consents there, data there? But we're going to have a webhook where we'll notify you and you could sign up to that. And then all the data management APIs. So place a data request, get notified about data readiness, get balance, get transactions, get account statement, get GST data. Now quickly, let me walk you through the Onemoney API. So the flow is pretty much the same, right? So if I go back to this and I now sign up, with my other Google account, let's say, right? And it says, okay, now what do you want to work with? And let's say this time I want to work with KP, who's the founder of Onemoney, right? So KP company, right? Let's say that's what it is. The contact number again, and then role. And by the way, let me give a better role for myself right now, okay? Because I must be making mistakes. So let's say this time I'm going to select Onemoney. So the Onemoney flow is essentially very simple to. So if you want to directly connect to Onemoney, the only thing you need not do is you don't need to tell us, consent parameters. Why? Because you're connecting to Onemoney, it's your business now to figure out what kind of consent parameters you want to store, because presumably you are building the consent management system yourself. That's why you want to connect directly to the network APIs of Onemoney, right? You don't want to subscribe to some other FIU service which is taking care of all of that. You're building it yourself, so you don't have to tell us that. But you go through the same flow of telling us what apps, and I'll tell you why. Because we have an SDK in headless mode and otherwise, and so the same client ID, client secret flow is necessary. The test data flow is the same. So you generate the key pretty much in the same way. The only difference is this is now important. You've got to also write to us to exchange API key information for the FIU middleware and the AS service. So whatever is connecting through the standard protocols to the AS service, that needs to use this API key, and whatever is connecting from your front-end, back-end applications to the non-standard APIs, right, which are registration APIs or consent management APIs. For those, you need to use these keys, right? So that's pretty much it. Now, if you go to Onemoney docs, I think I had that open. So again, very simple organization with the additional step of there being something called a consent manager. How much time do I have? 5 minutes. Yeah. So what does this mean? So some of you perhaps are looking to build the consent interface, right? So you're saying you want to actually provide the interface for all of the user registration activities, the discovery and linking activity, right? And the consent management activity. Now, I want to make a small point here, which is according to the current specifications, all of this has to happen through something called an AA domain, which means it has to go through something called an AA client. So therefore, we offer a choice of either using something called the Onemoney Android Custom SDK, which is a headless SDK, which can still allow you to bolt on your UX, right? But it needs to have something called a powered by Onemoney, and all the fulfillment of the interactions happens through interfaces offered by Onemoney SDK, right? And this will go up shortly soon. But many of you want to get going, and you want direct access to the APIs. So what we've done is we've actually exposed all the APIs directly as well. So we have the Verify VUA API. Then we have, let me just go through all these. So if you go to customer entity here, so you've got Verify VUA, user registration, Verify OTP, set VUA, initialize session, login, and so on and so forth. If you look at the accounts entity, so you list all the FIPs which manage accounts, discover accounts, initiate account linking. So you could pretty much control the UX. You could test your UX out by directly connecting to the APIs in test, but at some point in time, we will nudge you to essentially drop in our Onemoney custom SDK, as we call it. And the difference between standard and custom is this comes with screens, while the custom SDK is headless, right? So you could bolt on your UX, and it needs to have branding here. We also have something called a web SDK. So if you're building a web application, you could just drop in the web SDK, which is a bunch of Angular screens that connect to the APIs of Onemoney, and that's how you get going, right? So very similar organization to the APIs. We've got a Postman collection. So we're going to update the Postman collection shortly. Right now, it's got the Postman collection for just what are called the Rabbit APIs or the standard APIs. The registration APIs Postman collection is not yet up here, but it should be up there by tomorrow night. Right. So yeah. So with that, perhaps I can just switch back to this and see if you guys liked it. Give me some nice emojis if you liked what you saw, and I'm all set to take questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Vamsi. Before we do a quick word by KP.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. So let me invite KP onto stage. KP is the founder of Onemoney and the CEO. KP, could you raise your hand?
On the right side, there should be a raise hand icon. So you could hit that. I'll bring you on stage. Super. Hello, KP.
Hi. Are you able to see me and hear me?
We can't see you.
Okay, now?
We could for a second, and now we can't again.
Okay, let me do it again.
Okay, now we can.
Okay, thank you very much, folks. Thank you, Ariman, for the wonderful organization. Greetings to all solution builders. I'm really delighted to be in the company of so many enthusiastic youngsters full of energy and creativity with a unified purpose. I'm happy to see the desire to solve problems for the consumer in the financial sector. That's a great thing. We are all, pretty much armed well with the NBFCAA regulation, very well crafted by RBI, which Onemoney, as Vamsi has demonstrated to you, has converted that regulation into an alchemy of data, if I may say so. So it's easy to mix and mingle with your creative solutions for the consumer. We're together here today with the sole purpose of creating solutions for those who needed them yesterday, if I may say. And we share a mission, all of us, you and us, that will put speedy financial justice on the twin rails of consent and transparency, both of which came through in the presentation that Vamsi made, to deliver solutions that will really decimate the problems without a whimper, right? So we are fortunate to be here to do right for the consumer. We do not have to choose problems, in my opinion. There are so many around us. The only request I have is when the problem chooses you, just be alert and step up to solve it, right? And as you begin designing and structuring your solutions, don't allow your imagination to be shackled by any tradition. Do not allow even the regulation to come in the way, if I may say, of a genuine solution that is within the reach of a waiting consumer. We will work with you to get the solution through the loops, and if required, go all the way to an appeal to do a nuance change or anything to help us get the solution in the hands of the customer. Lastly, I would say leave no phone unturned, no code rewritten to deliver the best to the consumer. Onemoney is dedicated to those of you, each one of you who is a fintech, and allow me to say that you, the fintechs, are the cause of our existence. Our common purpose is the consumer's happiness. We have total trust in your talent to deliver the best. Our life, Onemoney life, is dedicated to assist you in that journey. Come on, let's get going. And thank you, Aryaman and Vamsi, for this wonderful presentation and sharing of ideas with everybody. Have a nice evening.
Thank you so much, KP. I will really appreciate that, and I'm sure our audience does. I will take you off stage if you don't mind, and then we'll do a few questions with Vamsi before we take a break prior to the next session. So thank you again, KP.
Thank you, Aryaman. Whatever you do is a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. So, guys, let's please put your questions for Vamsi into the questions tab, and we'll answer however many we can in the next 7 to 8 minutes, and then we'll take a break before the next presentation. Vamsi, all you.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just sort by upward. So the first question, Siddharth Nahar, is Money1 similar to FIU Connect of Yodlee? I did sit through Venki's presentation. Yes, of course, there are similarities in terms of what it provides. So the Money1 platform has an FIU service. It also has an FIP service. So I wouldn't be able to obviously do a feature by feature comparison. I don't know enough. I haven't spoken to Venki in detail about FIU Connect. But let me tell you that yes, the ethos of your question is, like Venki said, if you want to connect to multiple account aggregators, FIU Connect helps you. FinPro, we like to think of FinPro, which is the FIU services, providing you three things, right? Access, analytics, and governance, right? Step one is access, and access which is multi-AA access. So it's got no tight link or restriction that it will work only with AA1 or AA2. It will work with Onemoney, it will work with Yodlee, it will work with FinView, it will work with everybody. Of course, we haven't gone there yet where we've done the integrations with all of them or done the tests yet. The first goal is that it should work with Onemoney itself, right, which is like a sister company. The way we have designed these two platforms is they are in two different companies, actually. So we are a technology service provider in a parent company, born out of the AA ecosystem itself. And the Money1 platform is a data management platform which provides access, analytics, and governance. So in addition to access, we want to roll out not just fine-grained, granular API access, but also derived data APIs, right? And we want to actually look for partners who can build analytics on top, and we want to create a platform where we can roll out our own APIs plus partner APIs in one API platform that then other fintechs can kind of use and build on top of it, right? So somebody took that out, so I guess that means the answer was good. Okay, so the Aga Shahi has a very, very tough question for me, because he says, is the sandbox available 27/7? That's virtually a great challenge. Somebody in the hackathon can take that up, but I'm just joking. So 24/7, well, right now, no. We fundamentally, kind of like to keep our costs down. So we don't use systems on so all this is up on our cloud, right, on the AWS. But for the hackathon, we'll keep it up and running even during the weekends. I suppose a lot of you will work at nights and weekends. So we have extended the time periods to kind of, I think, 4 a.m. in the morning or something like that. But if you need access, let's say you're coming closer to D-Day and you want to do stuff, you can just write in to support at Onemoney. You heard KP. I think he's all for giving you all the support you need. So yes, we'll come as close as possible to 24/7, Agashahi. All right. So what's the difference between kind of data one can access between Onemoney and Money1? One key difference, Harsh, is that Onemoney only offers encrypted data, right? So Onemoney is a data blind service. So when you say kind of data, I'm going to take that as two separate things. One is the data ultimately comes from an FIP. So Onemoney is an intermediary which is just flowing that data through, right? So the data remains the same. Now, what's the difference? If you connect directly to Onemoney, you're going to get encrypted data because Onemoney is data blind. It's not supposed to open the packet, right? And basically look into it and do stuff with it. So, which means you've got to build the code to decrypt. Now, there are libraries available. I think many of us have shared those on our own developer docs. You will find access to an open source library and all of that stuff on the Onemoney side, right? If you're connecting directly to Onemoney, we provide you those information. So you've got to do stuff like managing consents, decrypting the data, and then figuring out how you want to store that data and how you want to use it. Money1, on the other hand, does all of that. The data is the same, but it decrypts it, it stores it, it makes it fine grained, it gives you APIs which directly give you the data, like I showed you, right? So there's a get balance, get data, get GST, get mutual fund, and it'll keep getting granular and granular. But the actual attributes that you'll get are exactly the same, right? There's no difference. I hope I answered that. If I move on to the next one, Nikhil. I know Nikhil. So Nikhil, yeah. So the developer mode features like design and personal mode are available for both. So it doesn't matter whether you're connecting directly to Onemoney or Money1. That's why the manage test data settings on the developer portal showed up, regardless of whether I, kind of went in as a Onemoney, regardless of whether I selected Onemoney service or whether I selected Money1. So the features are the same in terms of how you can design your test data. All right. So will the Money1 service, all the APIs be paid or free to use by the FIUs when it will be released in production? If you make it free, I think KP is fundamentally going to just, I don't know what he's going to do. He's going to think something's wrong with the rest of us, right? No, it's not going to be free. The way we are going to, our whole business is that we are doing all of this hard work in order to make it easy for the FIUs to actually get readily usable data, right? So Money1 is not free. It is going to be paid for, but it is going to be a pay as you grow, right? We want to cater to all kinds and all sizes of data users there. So SaaS pricing. So to get started, you don't have to commit to anything. You just get started, and as your volumes grow, you start paying us. But do pay us, please. Right? Okay. By when can we expect the features not available as of now to be released? So we've been doing our own hackathon. In the last few days, we've been doing daily releases, of our documentation of the portal. The portal's just come up. That's why in beta. So and on Slack, I keep posting updates, and more of my colleagues will join. So I think you will see the design your own data feature up hopefully by about Tuesday or Wednesday. You will see the webhooks feature up by hopefully about 5 days from now or 6 days from now. Definitely the next weekend when you guys are getting hacking friendly, you'll probably see those. But do write into us if you want something else. Our roadmap can be driven by you, and we're happy to support you, right, as is required. Can you touch upon how to decrypt the data received via Fetch Data API? The best way to, Vikram, saw your question yesterday. So how to decrypt the data via the Fetch Data API of Onemoney, right? Because if you're connecting to Money1, you don't have to worry about it. But I'm assuming you want to connect directly to the Onemoney API, get encrypted data. So there is a open source library which is out there on a link. I will just show you that quickly, where we show that if you are an FIU and you're connecting directly, you guys can see the. All right, never mind. So it's there on our on our docs, and I can share that on Slack or wherever. Share the link for a library that has been written, which does encryption and decryption based on the Diffie-Hellman key exchange mechanism, which is the spec. So if you use the interfaces of that library written by Shashi of August, I think you should be good in terms of decryption. Okay.
Sorry. So I think we that's our last question. We need to start the next talk at 5:05. So we'll take a short break before that. But thank you so much, Vamsi, for that great presentation and demo. I'm sure everybody's super excited to dive straight into the sandbox. So guys, could we please spam the emojis, which we love doing? And I'll just share. We also have a meme contest, which I think I mentioned earlier today afternoon. So that meme contest is happening in the Slack channel. So please, if you have some memes about account aggregators, please do post them there. And the funniest memes, we will award a 5,000 rupee prize to. So I'll just quickly share my screen to show you one meme which I saw, which made me laugh. You can see it here. So let us prove this meme right by giving Vamsi a lot of emojis and smileys and thank him for the great talk. Thank you. We'll be back here at 5:05 p.m. with FinView. So guys, take a little break. I mean, get a coffee or something, walk around, stretch, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, Vamsi.
Thanks, guys.